Hi, folks. Welcome to Wednesday's edition of iWrite Radio podcast stroke videocast. There's no PMQs today, so we won't be reporting from Westminster. Nicola Sturgeon's press conference today. There's a report just been issued by NHS Scotland regarding causes of infections in care homes. We're going to talk about that. There was a couple other things brought up about local areas and how the levels will affect them. Stuart's going to give us an overview of the press today, and I think we're going to talk in depth a bit about a blog by Iain Lawson. So the press conference, Stuart.
Yes. Bad-tempered is the top of the first thing I've got to say. Not surprising. The key issue is the report about discharges from care homes to care homes from hospitals, and the idea that everybody has that they caused all the outbreaks of COVID outbreaks in the care homes and therefore all the deaths. The Public Health Scotland, together with some independent academic group, have reported that hospital discharges are not significant statistically in all the deaths in care homes. The only significant factor they found was that the bigger care homes had more deaths. Well, I'm simplifying, but she got her first shout in, obviously, as she does, the First Minister, and then they started coming in. People, there were reporters there that had obviously turned up just for this care home report. ITN don't normally turn up. Somebody called Becky Smith. Oh no, Peter.
I think it can be summed up quite simply. We decided months ago, this being the press decided months ago, that the government was responsible for the spread of coronavirus in nursing homes, care homes, due to the fact that they emptied the hospitals to make room for COVID patients. Because we decided that, you're not allowed to come up with a factual, statistically driven report that says we were wrong, because this is a big stick we want to beat you with for the next 10 years. Now, it doesn't suit the press narrative that an independent investigation has found there is no statistical basis for people being decanted out of hospitals being the cause of infections in care homes. And they're not happy.
I'm sitting on the fence on that. I mean, I haven't yet read the report.
Stuart, if people want to look back at these podcasts through the length of the pandemic, I've been saying consistently, one of the big problems is people see care homes as being equivalent to hospitals. They are not. They're much more difficult to keep safe. They're covered in carpets, for God's sake. Soft furnishings all over the place. You can't wipe down a comfy armchair. You know, it's just much more difficult to keep the infection at bay. And from day one, they're not nurses. They're care home workers. Their training is not equivalent to hospital staff. The PPE in the beginning was insufficient. Eventually, the Scottish government started having to supply it. Now, I'm sorry, I never for a minute thought the main driver of this was going to be people being decanted out of hospitals. Because had they been decanted out of hospitals, whether they were COVID positive or not, and isolated, that should have stopped the spread. It's just incredibly difficult to isolate people as you would in a hospital.
Can I take you back to where you started just describing the situation, which I have to say I agree with. I think you've described it very well. I think the problem is so ingrained in the press that they actually, some of the press will have relatives they've lost and things, or old people, and they've internalized it. They will not believe
They haven't.
They're not just doing the bidding of the owners of the papers for a change. They will have internalized it, and they really believe that the governments are at fault.
I don't agree with you. I believe that the only way they can blame the government for this is by saying it's because of hospital discharge. They cannot blame the government the minute these people go through the door, unless it's because of hospital discharge. That's it. As soon as they go through the doors, any infection that was caught in a home is due to what happened in the home. Now, what they're not prepared to do is attack anybody that works in or runs a home. They're not prepared to do that. They don't want to do that. They want it to be the government's fault.
Of course
and to hell with the facts.
Yeah,
and your huge problem with that is, if it isn't the government's fault, and you don't put the blame where the blame lies, you can't solve the problem.
Well, you can't solve the problem unless you have an independent report, and then you act on the outcome. At the moment, that's just a narrow report, I believe, at the moment.
And if you are the press, you will not accept said report because it doesn't go with your narrative.
Well,
therefore, you are then part of the problem.
Yeah, well, of course you are. But as I say, I'm not taking everything you've said. I'm simply saying that we attack these journalists, these hacks, frequently for just doing the bidding of their pay masters. But to some extent, quite a lot of them will have internalized their belief on this issue.
Well, I'm sorry, I mean, I don't agree with that. I think the whole thing is about finding somebody to attack. They cannot attack the clinicians because they're the heroes at the moment.
All right, but look, Norry, what the reason I'm saying that is that it was so bad-tempered. We've never had such a chaotic press briefing. There were people talking while the chief medical officer was speaking to camera, and you could hear them talking behind, and other people came on and asked questions. We didn't even find out who was asking the questions. It was absolute chaos at some point.
Well, I think she was quite right to bite back, because
I'm sure she was. It was. Mind you, when the guy from Global came on and asked a question, it was an Edinburgh question, which our friend Jimmy will be pleased to know, is because the pubs in Edinburgh will be open till 6 o'clock, which they're not at the moment, come Monday, I think. I'm sure the First Minister said, phew, not a question about care homes. And she was more than pleased to talk about that.
Well, I mean, the next headline will be, independent report was not independent. They are not going to let this go. I can understand that it seems obvious that if you send somebody from a hospital to a care home with COVID, it's the fault of somebody for doing it. But if that person was sent to a care home and properly isolated and looked after, maybe there was no infection came from them. It annoyed me right at the beginning, because I have personal experience with my parents of care homes. Sure. And I'm not holding anybody to blame for this. It was a much more difficult, simply because of the setup of the care home that I know. I mean, they won't all be the same, but the one I know is a comfortable, reasonable place to put your parents. It has soft furnishings all over the place. People mix. Staff, you don't have a one-to-one situation. Staff deal with half a dozen and more people during the day. Very, very difficult to isolate people under those circumstances. There's shift changes. The staff go out into the community, possibly bringing the COVID back with them. It was this kind of idea that annoyed me from the beginning, that the press didn't look at what a care home actually looked like.
Okay.
And now they've got proof. Proof it is not. It hasn't proven that there has been no infection from hospital to care homes. It is simply said statistically it is not a driver.
I say As usual, of course, the report came out 5 minutes before the press briefing, so I'm stuck with second-hand reports about what's in it. So
well, I don't think it'll make any difference what it says.
No, probably not. But
it will be twisted and spun.
I do prefer to see them, at least the summary myself, rather than virtually third-hand reports.
Well, I didn't look at the Welsh one. I didn't realise the Welsh had done one. But if this is the benchmark for what they expect these reports to come back with, expect to see a Westminster report started ASAP, because they're trying to put it on the back burner. If they expect the same result from a report on English homes, it'll be kicked off in the near future.
Okay, shall we move on?
Well, we need to talk about what I suggested would happen with the levels beginning to happen. The borders question. Apparently, the guy from the borders believes the statistics suggest that the borders should go into level 2, not level 3. And this is going to be...
He was the first guy on, Peter McMahon.
Well, this is going to be the taste.
Level 1, he wants them to go into, and not level 2.
Well, this is going to be a taste of what we're going to get from now on, as the P&J up north, the Glasgow Evening Times, whatever, their reporters will be saying, why are you doing this to us when we should be here?
Last night there was one reporter had got hold of the indicator report, which is fairly comprehensive, and I started to study it last night, and then I thought, well, wait a minute. And one of the reporters who'd actually published something then had discovered, once they started reading the report, that oops, they just read the first page, which was the per number of deaths per 100,000 in an area, or infections, sorry, per 100,000. And realized, whoa, wait a minute. And they actually they had deleted the report and apologized. I forget who it was. And it's really not as simple as that. Might even have been a BBC, but they certainly had to back right off on
that. This is the problem when a government chooses to be transparent and starts publishing reams and reams and reams of information. The more information there is, the more arguments it creates. It's a lot tidier to keep people living like mushrooms.
You know what it's like on social media. So many people don't. You post something in social media, or they read something on social media, and they just read the headline and then start commenting about it. And the headline may not be accurate, and then they make a right fool of themselves.
But that, I foresee Nicola Sturgeon being snowed under during the pressers, at least for the coming couple of weeks, from various journalists from various parts of the country saying, why us? You said that if there was 4 people per 100,000, and it's going to be a nightmare. She is going to have so much information at her fingertips.
I think they're going to publish so much that some of these changes will be automatic. There won't be, the decisions are already made. This is the idea. The idea is that there are break figures in this indicators report. So if you reach this combination of figures, you change level. And so
I can't see that actually.
That's the point of them.
Well, I think that's what people think the point of them is. I don't think it'll be worked that way. I really don't. I think there's so much nuance in it.
Well, here's the big question at the moment anyway, Norry, because Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland and Wales are already in effective circuit breaker lockdowns. France has just announced they're going into a 4-week lockdown. We looked at, was it last night? Did we finish last night with that clip of all what's happening across Europe?
Yeah.
So we've got a broader perspective. And right now, we're not looking at that in Scotland. We've had just over 2 weeks of the school break, and that wasn't terribly severe. And as I referred earlier on, it would appear that pubs in Edinburgh will be opening again, but closing at 6 o'clock. So that'll cheer up Jimmy a bit.
Well, I'm not taking a stab at this. I simply don't understand why they've moved to this. That it seems to be they hope it placates people. It seems to be that they hope, well, maybe what they're trying to do is say to people without actually saying it, right, if you behave, you can get out at Christmas. You can move from level 2 to level 1. If you wear your mask and you don't go out too much and you don't speak to other people and all that, this is kind of up to you now. We've told you what the levels are. We've told you what you need to get down to, and we've told you what you need to do to get there.
Look around, Norry. It's all around us. Everybody's moving to this levels, stages, tiers system, as opposed to what we've had, which has been ad hoc. They've also said, more or less, that we've got 6 months ahead of this kind of system. So we're looking at this lasting right through till what, January, end of March.
Well, as I say, the only real advantage I can see in it is that it's putting the responsibility back onto the communities, saying, if you do it right, this is the carrot and this is the stick. Do it wrong, you're at level 4. Do it right, you're at level 1. You know, and it might work. It might work.
Shall we cheer up our listeners and viewers? Because I think Iain Lawson had a bit more of an optimism. I've described it as he got his words in the right order today. Iain Lawson, which he doesn't always. But he came up with 2 or 3 worthwhile quotes. His little thing is, independence is normal. A well-educated, resource-rich nation like Scotland needs to fully recognise just how abnormal our current position is. Nation after nation has successfully unloaded outside control from London over the decades. None have ever applied to return. So,
well, that's a direct quote from Peter A. Bell.
Well, I think, yes, he and Peter have been getting closer together, although, of course, Peter was never satisfied with anybody else's writing apart from his own. 1 or 2 points he does make. He says, we need to remember Brexit is still to arrive. Now, I've already been speaking with the immediate impact of Brexit, judging on the economy, is unlikely to be felt until the end of February, because I discovered so many companies that do have products crossing the channel one way or another have forward stock one way or another. So, but that's an expensive thing to do. Imagine taking extra 2 months stock. I know a company, they had to borrow an extra £100,000. Now they've got to pay for warehousing for that stock. They've got to pay the interest on that £100,000. And then they still don't know what's going to happen in the 1st of March.
I have a feeling that Brexit won't bite in real terms, in newsworthy terms until the pandemic's over. The pandemic will take the blame for everything.
Oh, that's the plan, of course.
And it won't be until, I would think, well into 2021.
Apparently, history teaches us, apparently, that a crisis is where the crooks, where you have the corruption, it just moves in. And look, and we've already seen that. There's a fabulous, it's 8.5 minutes, so it's a clip by George Monbiot.
Yeah.
And it sums up just how corrupt this government is in this country.
I don't think it's any worse than it ever was. I just think it's got public now. I think the internet has to be thanked for that.
I think it is worse, but Hey-ho.
Well,
What's the difference?
I
We're not going to fall
just,
out about it, are we?
I just think this government is particularly bad at hiding it.
Well, one or two quotes to cheer everybody up. Iain Lawson again. He says, "Who would you trust to rebuild Scotland after the pandemic and after the Brexit in Scotland's best interest?" Well, you're not going to trust Boris Johnson and crew, are you?
Which kind of brings me on to the situation with the SNP at the moment.
I feel like sighing today on that.
I'm getting seriously depressed about it. I have to be honest.
Do you know what question? The one that really I noticed today is, strangely enough, it's the one in the Times that you put up. Who is that one by? Kenny Fackerson.
All right. Kenny supports Nicola Sturgeon.
I know. And it was like, wait a minute. And he starts off by, what's his quote? Bedfellows. Strange bedfellows. And it occurred to me within 3 sentences, I was thinking, you're the strange bedfellow, Kenny Fack, been supporting Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, the gist of the article is that the people attacking Nicola Sturgeon are doing the wrong thing because it might open the door to Alex Salmond, who is less popular than Nicola Sturgeon, in his opinion. I happen to agree with him. I can't see an upside to the very effective, now becoming a stampede of effective attacks on the SNP hierarchy, and Nicola Sturgeon in particular, from the yes side. I cannot see the benefit of it. And I know that makes me one of these shut up for indie people, but I don't see why they think it's going to get them anything, because the vast majority of people don't read these people. That's the fact of the matter. And it's not going to oust her. And they've got nothing to replace her with should she be ousted. I just find it, I'm sorry, I find it Monty Python-esque. The factionalism, and I understand it. You want as honest leader and as honest a leadership as you can get for any political party, but the damage that could be wrought by it, and I
Strange, you know, the deepest and most worrying thing I read today. Now I've read Severin Carroll, Andrew Learmonth from the National, Paul Hutchin, a couple of articles in the Record, Kenny Fackerson, Wings himself. But I would say Barhead Boy, I don't know the real man's name, or if it's a man. He's been very firm. He's obviously he's not a young man, and he's been an independista for a long time. He's told us that. The very last sentence in his very deep article today is, "No more excuses, Nicola. Fire him and Ruddock now." And by that he means fire her husband. But how can she stay if she fires her husband is the question.
Well, I think she can. I mean, to be honest with you, if the Sturgeon report, we're being encouraged to call it, rather than the Salmond report, being carried out by Holyrood into the mismanagement of the investigation into Alex Salmond's behaviour whilst First Minister, if it turns out that they've decided that she lied, or they uncover major untruths, and she resigns, the SNP will be blamed for getting rid of the most popular leader in the UK for many years.
I mean, there's you talk about Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. I mean, a tiny country in the far side of the world, and she's famous all over the world. Now, Nicola Sturgeon may not be in that league yet, but she's certainly well up in the top, in that
I think so, but I'm sorry, if you're going to lead a country, you've got to have a certain amount of Machiavelli in you. I'm not suggesting for a moment that the balls up that's been made of this presumed attack on Salmond would even get into their third division of a Machiavellian football league. It's just so reminiscent of the Labour Party at its worst.
Someone suggested that whoever got involved in the politics of it, they have been watching The West Wing, but they haven't watched every episode.
Well, that's fiction. The reality is, if you go after somebody at the top of a political party, you better not miss. Okay, Alex Salmond wasn't in that position when this attack, if attack it was, started. But if there's been shenanigans at the crossroads, they're the people that need to go, and they need to be outed publicly.
So can I just go slightly sideways here? And what do you think about we've discovered that the SNP accounts, there's an awful lot of so-called ring fence money gone missing.
Okay, how many elections has there been since 2016?
Oh yes, I mean, it's you know, I mean, it's. Do you agree that there is money that was ring fenced for an independence campaign?
Yes, but I also think circumstances changed and moved very quickly.
Okay, but
how long did they have to raise funds?
Well, that's not. But you're looking about blame. I'm not talking about blame. What I'm interested in is what happens if we get the opportunity for an independence referendum next year after a successful May election. Where's the money going to come for that?
Well, it'll come from where it came from for the ring fence money, won't it? No, I think there's a reasonable argument to say, look, we've had 3 general elections, all called with very little notice, very little time to raise money. And that money had to be used for that. We're sorry, but we didn't have a choice. That, I presume, is what's happened. If there's an SQ fund with 700 million in it, I'm presuming they would have had to tell the Electoral Commission they had that funding there. So it's gone. I mean, I would certainly be quite charitable if they had used that money to fight the general elections. Because there's been what? There's been 2015, 2017, 2019.
Yeah, 2015, I think it was, the crowdfunder was. Yep. It does seem to me that there seem to be an awful lot of SNP politicians whose livelihood depends on the salaries that they get from, or the money they get as councillors or special advisors or politicians in London.
Well, I mean, the SNP is the biggest political party in Scotland.
Yeah, well, let me finish. All I'm saying is it seems like there's a, you know, do you want to upset the apple cart? Do you want to say, well, I've got these mortgages now and I'd just like things to carry on the way they are rather than gamble it all on an independence referendum.
So in effect, what you're saying is people representing us who are badged SNP don't want independence.
No, I think some people, we already know there's quite a lot of people inside the SNP, don't they? Are not even saying they want independence. We have a devolutionist called Brianna Spears standing as a candidate.
No, I think it would be unreasonable to say what you just said. There may well be 1 or 2 people in the SNP, in the SNP governance level, who are devolutionists. I don't know. But if you're trying to tell me that amongst our MSPs and MPs, there are lots of people who do not want independence, I refute that totally.
No, I didn't say that, but I must admit,
No,
I can see motivation.
Right. Okay. So you don't want independence because you get a pension.
No, what does that mean? I don't understand.
Well,
That's
you've got your old age pension.
sorry?
Independence might affect your old age pension. Why would you want to rock the boat? I mean, the argument that your income is the reason that you would lie to the electorate is nonsense. I can't see it. I don't understand.
I'm
Why
sorry,
would
you're going
anybody
too
believe
far.
that?
I mean, there
It's what
are
you've
many
just said.
look, there are many explanations for, you could say, the lack of momentum at the moment towards having, you know, we could say there's I'm frustrated. I'm a part of that wing of the party that we not seem to be. The gradualists seem to have totally taken over, and they seem to be in the pockets of the Charlotte Street partners as well.
Gosh, we didn't really cover anything provable in that statement, did we, Stuart?
I've just made my position clear, though.
And you can prove none of it.
Okay, what can you
Well,
prove?
you can prove none of it.
What are you trying to prove then?
Well, I mean, I'm simply saying that I do not believe. I mean, the people I know in the SNP who are paid by whichever government, whether an MP or an MSP, to hold those positions, still believe in independence. That's my personal experience.
So yes, but when? You're trying to
Well,
say there are gradualists and fundamentalists.
Well, wait a minute, Stu.
Are you a gradualist?
That's not what you said.
No.
What you said was there are people in the SNP who will take the money for as long as possible and to hell with independence.
No, I didn't say that at all. I said
You
they would worry about their income, and who wouldn't?
Well, yeah,
and worry about gambling it on another independence referendum right now.
So your position is the people that are getting paid because of the status quo being as it is want to maintain the status quo.
I think there are quite a lot of people that would
which
feel that
is
way.
Exactly what I said in a rougher, ruder way, which is they don't want independence. They want a status quo so they can keep their wages.
Same thing at all.
Right, okay.
They're happy to let things roll on. How do you just describe a gradualist then?
A gradualist thinks that the correct strategy is to look long term. That's what a gradualist is. They've got the same aim as somebody who wants an independence referendum next year, but they think it was more likely to succeed over time. That's a gradualist.
Okay.
And I'm not a gradualist.
Well, I am not a gradualist. I think if you're an old person, you probably won't be. One hopes also, of course, for an SNP or an independent Scotland would be better for my children and grandchildren that are here.
Well, let's not just skip past gradualists. At the moment, the gradualists are right.
Well, that's easy to say because you can't prove it wrong.
58% of people now want Scottish independence.
Okay,
in 2016, in 2014, when we voted on it, 55% of people didn't want independence.
Well, that's far too simple, as you know. I'm not going to let you get away with that.
Well, you'll have to let me away with it.
There's a strong case being made that actually the polling for independence was higher than 50% back in 2014, and the referendum was actually lost. Rather, it could have been won back then.
You mean the one Sunday Times poll that led to the vow?
No, I'm just saying this was
at
an argument for it.
51%, within 3% of, yeah, right. I'm sorry, right at this minute, what the gradualists said would happen is happening. We've lost one.
Depends on your perspective.
Well, who's
doing all the work to improve the polling? It's almost certainly the unionists. They're making such a bodge of us staying in the union.
the gradual.
Who wouldn't want to be Scotland to be independent and
Stuart,
running its own
Stuart,
affairs?
wait a minute. How can you deny that the people that are right up to this point have been the gradualists? Everything they said would happen has happened, including losing the 2014 referendum.
Look at the mess of the party.
Right. So now we're talking about the mess of the SNP, not independence.
Yep.
Okay. So remind me that you're allowed to change goalposts whenever you feel like it.
No, they're inseparable.
No, they're not.
You try and separate them out.
Okay, Stuart. So the yes movement doesn't exist.
Oops.
I'm sorry. You're
By the way,
attempting.
we're running into a lot of time. We decided that we needed to be sharp today. You've got somewhere to go.
Okay. We'll come back to this though.
We always will.
It's
not as though it's going to end now, is it?
We are going to call it a day now. Because
Good.
I do have to go to a hospital appointment. Thanks for being with us, Stuart. I'm Norry.
Always a pleasure, Norry.
And thanks for listening, folks. One day we'll go a whole day without disagreeing on something.
Look, I can say hello there.
Cheerio for now, folks. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.